This episode is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. Do you ever find yourself playing the budgeting game? Well, with the Name Your Price tool from Progressive, you can find options that fit your budget and potentially lower your bills. Try it at Progressive.com. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Price and coverage match limited by state law. Not available in all states.
If your fashion wish list lives rent-free in your brain, you need to be on Poshmark. With Poshmark, you're shopping millions of listings from thousands of closets, each curated by someone with their own style. Vintage finds, designer pieces, and everyday staples all in one place. Search for your favorites or let the discovery come to you. Poshmark makes it easy to find what you actually want to wear at prices that feel like a quiet win. Download the Poshmark app today and use code PODCAST10 when you sign up to get $10 off your first purchase.
A Swift Kick in the Ass, episode 77.
All big changes start with a swift kick in the ass. Join the journey of lifelong friends, John Curren and Tom Stewart, as they make conventional thought bend over and take a boot to the keister. Warning, listeners may notice a force equal to or greater than needed to get your ass moving. A swift kick in the ass, living life on your terms.
Welcome, I'm Tom Stewart, and I'm joined with my lifelong childhood friend, John Curren. In today's episode, No Cape Required, Courage. Welcome to the show, John.
Thanks, Tom. It's so funny that, no cape required for Superman, because people are always saying how much I look like Superman. And I was very tempted to wear my cape.
And I look like Lex Luthor.
That's why we make the perfect partnership, my friend. But today we're here to talk about courage and how it's not just heroics, and how courage is an emotion that we feel when we have this this perception of either danger or threat, and then taking action in lieu of that danger or that threat. It's a choice or a willingness actually to confront your fear or face your fear. And in my eyes, you don't need a cape to do that. You don't need a burning building, or you don't need to pull someone from a wreckage of a car. It could be someone like Tom here.
But I would like a cape. I would like this I told Jen once, and that's my wife, that I just want to get a cape and wear it around so it kind of reminds me of doing good things. And she's like, if you wear a cape, I'm calling the mental hospital.
Didn't you watch The Incredibles? Capes are no good, man. They get caught up in gears. Yeah. I mean, a lot of superheroes have died from cape accidents.
That's right. But no, I was telling you before, you're right. I wrote an article once about not being a hero, and this was based on, I was driving down I-95 once, and a car crossed over into my lane, and it was coming towards me. It hit the car in front of me. I dodged it. It hit the car behind me, and the car behind me rolled over, and it hit a couple more. And I stopped and I helped the people out that had flipped over, and it was very scary, and I don't know if that's courage running back. I mean, I guess I could have kept on going on, and I didn't. I think it was just the humanity in me that stopped and made me do that.
Well, I think it's part of who you are. Heroic acts can be a one-time deal, just like you said, in response to an accident or something, some threat or danger that's present. And courage is definitely part of that, because you're facing that fear or that threat. But it's I think it goes I think it goes beyond those one-time acts. I think we all have threats and dangers in our lives that are very personal, and that when we stand up and we face them, we grow as people. We become more courageous. And Tom, I think that I started to say this before. I think that you're giving up Diet Coke and quitting Diet Coke is a sign of courage. You were facing a health threat, potential health threat from drinking Diet Coke. It's it's pretty prevalent. You became aware of it, and you took action against it. To me, that's a sign of courage.
Well, thank you. And it's been almost 2 years, I think, now, drinking only water.
Yeah, same thing. I think people who give up smoking, they're facing a health threat. They're facing a danger, and they're taking steps. Most people aren't going to see that as being courage, and in some cases, I guess, it isn't. But what about a kid who falls off of his bike, who skins his knee when he's riding his bike? That little kid, getting up with the skinned knee and trying again. They have this perception of getting hurt, of danger, of a threat, and they get up and they try again and they keep going. To me, that's such a great example of courage that we have every day in our lives, but we adapt to our actions and to our behavior, and it doesn't seem like it's courage. It just seems like everyday life.
Well, I remember this is, and I think childhood's a great time to develop your courage, because those are times that are really tested when you're by yourself on the, out in the playground or in the mean streets of Hollywood where we grew up, and you have a lot of bullies around. I remember one time riding, I was in high school, I was sitting in the front of the bus, and in the back of the bus, there was this kid named Artie, and Artie was kind of heavy set, glasses and kind of dorky. And there was this girl that was kind of being really mean to him. And I mean, really mean. They were making fun of him. The two girls, I remember they were teasing him. And he finally couldn't take it anymore. So he got up and the only thing he knew was he spit on him. And then they started slapping him and beating him up. And I mean, it was just horrible. And I got up and I was just like, stop it. And I never talked, it was like, they didn't even know really who I was because I used to sit up in the front of the bus, but I screamed, stop it. And they were like, looked at me and then they were like, what are you going to do? And then I thought, I was like, what can I do? I'm not going to go beat up these girls, and then I
girl say stop it?
No, the girl, I said stop it to the girls to make them stop hitting this kid Artie.
Right.
And then they were like, what are you going to do? Right. And I'm thinking, I can't go back and kick their ass because that makes me an ass. So I looked at them, and I love comic books. And the first thing I thought of was the Joker. And I go, and I start laughing like crazy, like I'm a madman. And they both sat down and go, he's crazy. And they left the kid alone. And after that, I was like a hero to Artie. That was he was like, thank you for standing up for me. And it made me feel good. But it took courage to say that,
Yeah, it's so funny. It's most people, if you just hear that story or just hear the laugh part of it, yeah, you laughed. You did the Joker laugh, and what kind of action is that really? It's a laugh. It's a laugh, but it is a step. It is a sign of courage. It took you. It did. You didn't know what else to do. You were confronting fear and danger, even if it was in a laugh, the form of a laugh, And
sometimes it can backfire on. Since we have been friends since we were little kids, I can recall a time that I was at John's house and there were some neighborhood kids and they started throwing rocks. And they're throwing it. John had this big stone wall, so you couldn't really see through the fence. You just knew there was kids on the other side, and we'd throw stuff back. Then they were throwing stuff, but then they were progressively. And it wasn't even rocks. They were throwing other stuff first, like fruit,
grapefruits,
right? And all of a sudden, they started throwing rocks, and John went into lecture mode. John was very good at lecture mode when he was a kid.
Even back then.
Yep, and he was like, "Listen, it's really dangerous if you throw rocks." And he's going off on his whole lecture, and all of a sudden, this damn boulder flies across the wall, and it hits John right in the head. And he staggers and he's bleeding, like spurting blood all over the garage. And I mean, I thought he was going to die. It was really scary. But, you stood up, you took a chance, and yeah, you paid the consequences. But
yeah, courage is like a muscle. You use it or you lose it. And if you focus on building your courage, like you build a muscle, you can actually build up your courage and become more courageous. As you stand against against your perceptions of danger and against threat and the fear that you feel in those situations, you can make a choice to take a step forward and face that fear. I think that my sitting down with my wife 10 years ago and saying, enough is enough. I can't take this financial situation we're in anymore, and we're going to make some changes. And paying off that debt was an act of courage. It certainly was a threat to my family and a danger to my family. My kids were very young back then. They really didn't understand how much in debt we were and how much, we're in crisis mode. And thank God that we opened our eyes back then and started taking action and grew some courage, because
and John, that can have
Yeah.
courage. It takes courage to talk to your spouse sometimes. Sometimes there's something you want to talk about and you're hesitant to talk to them because you're afraid of how they're going to react or how they're going to see it. And it does take courage to open, especially something, about spending a lot of money. If your wife is used to spending money and, are part of the problem, she might take offense to it. So absolutely stepping up and saying, hey, this is something I want to discuss, and, and also accepting your own responsibility in the issue and not blaming. It does take courage.
Yeah. So in dealing with, in dealing with courage, dealing with fear, facing fear, how do we go about doing that? And, what are the benefits, I think, of doing that? I think one thing is that you're building your character, you're growing stronger through the process. But I think it's so much more than that. What that comes out of taking small steps and building courage. It really does change your life. There are certain things, I think, just like when reading a really good book that opens your eyes, I think courage opens your eyes. When you take a step, when you stand up for yourself against that bully, against that situation in your life that's bullying you, when you take a stand, it opens your eyes, and you quickly realize that these scary situations, these things that so many people fear and run from, when you stand up and fight, they cower and they actually back down. And you grow stronger as a person when you do that. And I think that is one of the first steps that you can take towards living life on your own terms. That you have to have courage to take that first step.
John, you talk about fear, and I know we've given this acronym before for fear, which is fantasy expectation appearing real, because you create these ideas of how something's going to turn out, and they're not always correct. But having the courage to stand up in the presence of fear, you need fear in order to have courage, because it's when that fear is there that you say, I'm scared, but I'm going to do it anyways, and I'm going to try. In which leads you to the topic of, can you develop courage as a skill? So, when I think about, I told you, like a year ago, I had sung karaoke for the first time in front of my family and friends, right? And it's one of those things that you always have that, your family sees you a certain way. So when I even went up to the microphone, I remember my brother-in-law going, Tom's going to sing? Like, what? And I sang. And you can exercise that to where that was almost like breaking the ice. So now every time we have a party, we have karaoke, I get up and I sing some more. And for me, that was a very scary thing. But it's anything in life, you can exercise it and practice it until you get better at it. If your fear of public speaking, a lot of people like you joined Toastmasters, and there's ways to develop and overcome those fears.
I remember back when I was in Little League. Actually, I wasn't actually in Little League at the time. I was trying out for Little League. So we had to go through and, show that we could throw the ball and we could hit the ball. And basically the only thing I could do was sit on right bench. I sucked. I didn't know how to throw. I didn't know how to catch, didn't know how to bat. I didn't even know how to say my name. When the coach asked me my name, I was so nervous I couldn't even speak. That's how bad I was when I was about 12 or 11 or 12, I guess.
For Little League? No, Little League would have been younger than that.
I started
man.
late. Dude.
Really?
Oh, dude. I started off in like the Pony League or something like that. Oh, yeah. It was, I don't remember what, I started late.
Those times, John, are so, like, I hate baseball. I hope I'm not offending anyone, but I hate baseball. And I can trace it back to why. And it was in first grade, you were supposed to start in T-ball.
Right.
And I signed up for T-ball, and they didn't stick me in T-ball. They stuck me in Little League, which were the kids that were a year older that already knew how to play. And so I went there, and the coach, the first thing he did is, let's see if you can catch the ball. And he throws it up. I lose it in the sunlight, and it hits me smack in the nose. I start crying. I'm like, I'm done with this. I hate this game. And it kind of turned me off, because I remember before that I used to collect baseball cards. And after that, I had no passion, and I avoided it my whole life. And unfortunately, even when I went in the Air Force, I thought I was all done with Little League, and not with baseball. And what do? We go on alert. We fly to a base, and the sergeant's like, all right, we're going to play a game of softball. And I'm like, softball? I suck at softball. I hate it, and I had to get out there and do it again. But I did it. I overcame my fear. I said, all right, let me try it, and, I'll play. Still don't really enjoy it, but it's those formative years that you talk about. But yeah, the courage to try something, even though you fear it or dislike it, is important.
Yeah, I was just so fearful of putting myself out there, or even just talking, that I literally was so tongue-tied I could not speak. I don't even know how I did it. I think I pointed to my name on the list. I couldn't say my name. I was so nervous. Forward, 8 or 10 years when I was in college, and my dad had always been pushing me to join Toastmasters, and my mentor at the time, he also suggested Toastmasters. In fact, he invited me to a Toastmasters meeting. So here's this guy who has a history of being so tongue-tied that he can't even talk when he's asked his name, and he's going to a Toastmasters meeting. Well, let me say I did speak my name. I did say my name. And I also had about 200 or 300 ums and ahs. As I think back about that experience, at that meeting in Toastmasters, they have this little metal clicker. It was like a little insect. I think they had them like little crickets.
Or frogs.
Frogs.
And it's exactly what I'm using for my dog to train right now. You click it when you give him like a treat, and it reinforces that Pavlov's dog.
So in Toastmasters, when you say or ah, it's called an audible pause. And the reason why you do that is it gives your brain time to think, apparently, of what you're going to say next. So they would click, and I'm not exaggerating. I was the king of ums. I had 200 or 300 ums in about a 2-minute period. It was ridiculous, but that's where I started from. And before it was all over with, I have been in several different Toastmasters groups. I'm a competent Toastmaster. I've made that certification. I've been president. I've served on many different roles, to run the meetings. And I've actually taught some courses on public speaking. I was public affairs officer for a medical facility for several years. So,
John, you know what you could have done? Just smoke a cigar. If you know, George Burns, the famous comedian, used to use that for timing. So he would tell a joke, and before he would tell the punchline, he would take a puff on the cigar, because he knew it gave him time. Because if you just sit there and don't say anything, it's kind of awkward. People are afraid of the silence. And that's the same way in radio or podcasting. People constantly want to fill the void. They're afraid to pause and let there be quiet. But if you listen to a professional broadcaster, say someone like Rush Limbaugh or someone, I'm just using him because he used to be one of the talents on my radio station. I would listen to some of his shows, and he would take such long pauses that I thought they were off the air. So I'd like be checking to make sure that we were still on, and then he'd come back. But it's that awkward pause that people are afraid to speak.
Yes, that's very true, and that courage to speak, I wasn't born with it. In fact, going back to what you said just a few minutes ago, Tom, fear is part of courage. It's a precursor to courage. You are going to feel fear before you get the courage. And to me, I think that is just key, is a key piece of information, knowing that when you feel fear and you're scared, courage is on its way. It means you have a decision to make and you have a choice. And that choice to either run or fight or cower, that's up to you.
John, I had, and this is not to show my bravado or whatever like that, but it's something
Sure
maybe it is. But physically, right? I do Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. And one of my last tournaments I had I'm older. I'm almost 50 years old now. So when I go to a tournament, there's not many guys to choose from because it's a young man's sport. So when I go to my competition, I'm ready to get on the mat. And there had been one guy there full of tattoos and real big, looked like he was juiced up. And I thought he was one of the black belts there that was there for the exhibition. So I get up on the mat and I'm supposed to fight lightweight. I fight I was like 157 at the time. And I'm ready to compete. I get up and they go, okay, there's your opponent over there. And I look and it's that big dude. He's like 6'4", ripped, totally has like 60 or 70 pounds on me. And I'm like, I have to fight him? Yeah, like looking like there must be some mistake, I mean, I'm a lightweight, this guy's like a super heavyweight. And they're like, oh yeah, there's no one else in your category in your age group, so we're matching you guys up. It said they call them absolutes. So normally in jiu-jitsu, you have your normal matches, and if you win, the winners will go to a no weight division and they can fight from lightweight all the way up. So they said, we're just going to give you an absolute, and they gave
absolutely going to die.
Right. And I was like, they were like, do you want to not fight? And I was like, and at that moment I was like, no, I'll fight. You know what? I'm not going to let him tap me out. And that's what he won because the move I had been practicing was with lighter guys. And I went to go try to throw him. He landed right on top of me, and the whole match he was on me, but I would not submit. I would not let him tap me out. And I fought, and it was just the courage of stepping on the mat is what I felt a winner, even though I lost a match and, ended up going to the doctor after because he punched me in the eye by accident when he was trying to choke me. But it was that, that fear that you can either stand up or run.
Now think about how you would have felt. I mean, you just described about how you felt for going through and stepping up. But think about the alternative. And if you would have said, no, I'm not going to fight, and you walked away. That it's things like that have a lasting impression on people, and either saying yes or no, whether you're going to fight or you're going to flee. Those type of decisions, those type of choices have great impact on our lives.
I would have had to live with that, and I would probably still to this day think about, man, I should have at least stood up or tried. And instead of just give up, because, everyone is around. My coach is there, my friends, my teammates, and I wanted to not go away scared. I wanted to at least face my fear and get on the mat. All I remember is my coach looking at him and going, you got to move, don't let him get a hold of you.
Yeah. But, the next time you see someone, you're put in that situation, and let's just face it. I don't care if you're in jiu-jitsu or you're just a regular person off the street. We all have our fights to fight. It may not be a physical fight like using jiu-jitsu and being on that mat. It might be, maybe you're fighting a health issue, or maybe you're trying to cope with a disability or some type of health problem or debt or something that poses real danger or threatens you in
Right. I
some
mean,
way.
let's face it. Most times in your life, it's not going to be a physical encounter. I mean, very rarely are you going to be getting in fights. It's like I said, like when childhood, yeah, you probably that's the greatest time that you'll ever get in a fight, and the
Well,
kids don't know what they're doing. But it's standing up to something at work, or so a coworker that's harassing
it
you.
applies to it applies to every aspect of your life from the time you're a kid through the time you're an adult. There are still bullies especially in the workforce. People that we work with, they can be bullies if you let them. And what I've learned is that when you stand up to them, they back right down.
Absolutely.
Uh, but it's kind of funny you're talking about kids. It's so funny. My little boy Johnny, who's 6 years old now, I think it's his last year. Over the summer, my office kind of looks out over the cul-de-sac, and I can see the kids out there. And I'm looking out there one day, and a group of kids are playing, and my son is kind of standing in the middle of the cul-de-sac next to our neighbor boy who's about a foot taller than Johnny, is a little bit older, and Johnny's got his chest puffed out. I mean, and he's staring up like a foot to this kid, like looking him in the eyes, but a foot down below, and he's like Chicken Little. He's like looking at him, and then they back away. And I asked my daughters what happened, and they said, well, apparently the little kid was making fun of Johnny's sisters, and Johnny wasn't going to have that. And he stood up. He stood up and he said, don't talk about my sisters that way. And I mean, that's why he was all like puffed up. And my boy, he doesn't know about fighting or anything like that. He was just doing
The right thing.
what he thought he was standing up for his sisters. And, I think we all have experiences like that in our lives. And as we take a look at our lives, think back about it. You're going to see experiences like that, and in some cases, you're gonna bow your head in shame because you said you didn't fight. You ran when you should have fought.
Well,
It's impacting you.
And I think we've all encountered some situation like that where,
Absolutely.
say, sometimes you've served. You and probably all our listeners have seen sometimes a man and a woman fighting out in public, and the guy is being abusive, and you just kind of turn your head and, oh, it's not my issue, it's not my problem, don't get involved, and everyone around you does the same thing. And then you think back and you're like, man, I should have said something, I should have done something or stood up. That person was in the wrong of how they were treating the other individual. And I think as a society, and I know there's been experiments about this, when I think there was someone that was being raped or stabbed to death, right, in New York. And
New York being murdered.
Right. And everyone just looked out the window and it's like they went and closed their windows, like, all right, it's not my problem.
No one even called.
Right.
The police, even there was like 6 different times to where people kind of noticed and they did nothing about it. Yeah, that's
and I think it's 2020 that does the specials where what would you do, where they put actors in certain situations, whether it may be racist or sexual or what have you, and see if people will stand up and help those people, in certain environments. And it's very interesting how humans react and why they stood up and why they choose not to stand up.
Right. And, that's so individual. And whether you stand up and you fight or you run and you hide or you cower, I mean, that's all a personal decision. And I'm certainly not knocking any of it. I certainly know I have my own experiences that I regret, times where I should have fought and I didn't. And I know how those,
and sometimes there's times
how they weigh on you.
And there's sometimes that you should not stand up. Sometimes it's better to turn the other cheek.
Yeah. So, part of all of this, and what I want you to walk away with, is that there's an assessment part of this. There is an understanding and a recognition of what you're feeling, why you're feeling, and what you should do, in response to that emotion. And we face this day in and day out. In fact, I like to call it everyday courage. It's not dealing with heroes. It's not dealing with the burning buildings or saving somebody's life. It could be saving your own life. It could be dealing or facing with threats and dangers that are very personal to you and not really seen from you know from others. Only known to you that you're facing, and it takes great courage to do that. And I'm here to tell you that I really believe that if you take small steps every day, in fact, one small step you could do is do something out of your comfort zone, something that nothing dangerous or anything. Nothing doesn't have to be anything too crazy, but do something that you feel uncomfortable doing, and that's going to help push you. That's going to help you build and build courage in other areas of your life. I'm all about taking a calculated risk. We all need to take risks in life, but we don't want to be foolish about it. We don't want to put ourselves in danger. But if we never take any risks, then we never reap any of the rewards from that. So, I think it's time really to start addressing our fears and start living a life of courage. Even if it appears small, it's going to have a snowball effect, and it's going to grow the more and more that you do it and you take steps to help face your fear.
Well, very well said, John. There's lots of good quotes about courage.
Absolutely.
One of them that I was looking at was courage is doing what you are afraid to do. There can be no courage unless you are scared. That's by Eddie Rickenbacker. And all of them are along the same lines. It's basically what we were talking about. Courage is not the absence of fear. It's just that it's there and we do it anyways. We act within that fear.
Oliver Wendell Holmes said something very similar, but I'll add this on because it's the little nuance I think is important to recognize. Courage is about doing what you're afraid to do. There can be no courage unless you're scared. Have the courage to act instead of react. And I think that is about every day. That hits everyday courage just right on the head. Is that this is a choice that we make, and we can either react to something, or we can act, or we can react. And when you act, you take control of your actions. When you're reacting, it's sometimes it's just spontaneous, and it's just a reaction. It's just a kind of a natural thing that we don't necessarily try to control or have any control over. So being proactive and addressing your fears, and I also know too that a lot of the time fear the fear or the emotion of fear deals more with lost my train of thought there. Fear and emotion is perception and what you think of it. And sometimes just not knowing something, having never experienced something, having never gone through it before, it is fearful.
When you were talking about stimulus and response, there's a little card that I used to carry in my wallet. And it was saying between stimulus and response, there's a space. And within that space is your power to choose our response. And we don't always do that. Often we will, like you said, it just automatically, it comes out, whether you're being defensive or, someone's attacking you. But you can choose next time someone is verbally confronting you, hesitate for a moment, use that space that we were talking about, imagine you're George Burns puffing on your cigar, and choose your response rather than just blurting it out and saying the first thing that comes to your mind. And within that ability to choose, that's where you grow, and that's where you have your freedom. Because no matter what situation you're in, even if you're in jail and someone is berating you, you still have the choice of how you're going to choose and how you're going to react.
You know, it's kind of interesting to me as you're talking about emails. Kind of made me think back about my days in corporate America, whereas I had a coworker who paid the price because he wrote a very long emotional email to someone higher up and hit send. There was no courage involved in doing that because he did not perceive any danger or threat from doing that. I have since learned that taking that space, taking that time, taking that breath, or maybe before hitting send, just wait overnight before you send that email, just burning that bridge.
So you're saying don't be a dumbass. Courage is not about being a dumbass, which is true because sometimes people think that someone that's real brash and talks a lot is courageous.
Yeah, courage is not. I mean, risk is involved in it, but not just illogical risk, not risk for risk's sake, not being stupid about your actions. It's about thoughtful action and facing your fears and saying, I'm not going to put up with this crap any longer. To me, those are the people who are really who have real courage. People who are sick and really coping with health issues, instead of just giving up, fighting, and not just laying down, making the most out of a bad situation. I'm sure if you've listened to the show before, you know that one of my good friends back in college, her name was Kim Bergalis, and she died of AIDS. She was purposely infected with the AIDS virus from her dentist. And that's how she contracted the disease.
What a dick move, man.
Yeah. Kim was one of the most courageous people I think I've ever known. And here she was given this death sentence. And she wasn't thinking about herself. She was thinking about other people and how she could help make the best out of this terrible situation she was in. And before it was all over with, before she died, she spoke with Congress. She helped pass laws. In fact, I think there's Kim Bergalis Act or some law associated with her name associated with it. She helped bring universal health care, make that law to say, everyone must do certain things in healthcare to protect each and every one of us from what a cowardly act that the doctor made in infecting Kim with a disease that was going to kill her. But I think there are times when there are things that happen to us in our life that we have no control over. We don't ask for them. They're just horrible. Like my friend Kim being infected with AIDS. It's not something she asked for. It wasn't something of her, own doing. It wasn't her behavior. It had nothing to do with morals. It was a bad situation, and she made the most out of it. She reached deep, and she faced that real danger, that real threat. And
there's one segment of the population that I really did not know as much about until my wife worked for an organization called Women in Distress. And it was about battered women. And you talk about people that have to be courageous to stand up against their spouse that's berating them physically and mentally.
Yes.
and the possibility of losing their entire family by standing up. There's so much overwhelming against them that it takes unimaginable courage in order to get out of that situation.
Yeah, I agree. I guess why I'm a little hesitant here is because I'm thinking of that fine line, between heroics and
Survival.
and yeah, and just plain courage too. Courage isn't necessarily heroics, but courage is absolutely facing. And I think that the key to courage is perception. And it may not be maybe that's the difference is between real danger and perceived danger. I don't know. It's interesting, but anyhow, I think again, these are all good things for us to think about. And I said this earlier on in the episode that we adapt to our situations, no matter what they are. They become our lives. What we face day in and day out becomes our lives. Our decisions, they all accumulate, and they bring us to this point to where we are right now.
Which is probably the end of the show.
Yeah, this is the end. This is the end of the show.
Yes.
And these are choices that we make that get us here. And it's really up to us as far as are we going to display courage or are we not? John Wayne, I'm going to paraphrase because I don't have the quote up in front of me, but John Wayne was saying that courage is getting up in the saddle again after the horse throws you off. It's getting up, trying again. And I think that we all have courage deep within us, or we have that opportunity to experience courage when we feel fear, and we have that choice before us to either run or fight.
Well said, my friend. Well, this is Tom. I thank you for listening. Make sure you check out swiftkickinass.com. Sign up for our free membership. Get all kinds of cool courses and other goodies, all for free. Just exchange your email. That's all we ask. Thanks for listening. Peace.
Peace. Thanks for listening. Talk to you next time.